Hello, everyone who's joined. I see we're at we're at the top of the hour here, but I'm going to give folks a couple minutes to join. I know there are some conflicts, so we might have a smaller group today, but thank you all for being here. All right, I see more people are filtering in. We're going to give folks another minute or so here to join. So just bear with us while we wait for a couple additional people to get on the line. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to go ahead and get us started knowing that we'll probably expect a few people to join in the next minute or so. The one thing I want to note at the top is that Diana is not able to be on this meeting today, and I know Meg is going to be running late and hopefully able to join, but she has had some stuff come up that really needs her attention. So with that, I'll go quickly through the agenda. Like I said, since Diana won't be joining and Meg isn't here right now, we will kind of skip through the welcome and introductions from them that they normally give. And we'll get into the announcements, and then we'll check in for most of the meeting on the draft recommendation process and specifically where we are in terms of state agency feedback and what the next steps look like. Then we'll get into a discussion around what comes next once the recommendations are more finalized, how we get into the voting process and all that good stuff. And then we'll adjourn. And I know it's a busy time and a bunch of folks had conflicts today, and maybe folks are even traveling for the long weekend. So we have a smaller group. We may end up with a shorter meeting. We'll just kind of see where things go. So with that, since we don't have Diana or Meg here right now, instead, I'll say what I know they would normally say, which is just thank you all for being here. We really appreciate everyone on the committee and also those of you that join these calls and contribute your expertise who aren't kind of officially a part of this committee, but are very much an important part of these meetings. So thank you for being here. I'm Summer Modolfino. I'm the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer for the state of Maryland, and I am filling in for Annika LaFave while she is on maternity leave. So if you've seen communications from her in the past, she's still very much the food systems resiliency coordinator who is leading this work. And for those who are on the line, if you don't mind just putting your name and organization into the chat, that'll be really helpful for all of us so we can all see who's here and for our kind of record keeping after this meeting. All right, and with that, I'm going to go through the roll call. I'm just going to focus on the voting members. So like I said, Diana and Meg are not here. Do we have Beth Brewster on the line? I don't think so, but just checking. Okay. Anyone from Delegate Charkoudian's office? LaMonica Jones, are you on the line? Right. Lisa Lockenmeyer, are you on the line? Joe Liu, I think I see you. It looks like we've got Joe on the line. Nancy, I see you on the line. Dr. Range, are you on the call? I don't think so. Okay. And is Teresa on? I don't think we're expecting her today. Cool. All right, so that covers all the voting members, and I'll go through and just take the attendance for everyone else after the meeting. Oh yeah, Anne Marie, go ahead.
I think I'm a voting member now.
Oh, did you guys fill out the survey?
No, but I thought, oh, you mean for separate of the the subcommittees as opposed to the general group.
Yeah, so I'll follow up
Okay.
with you. Yeah, yeah, but we can make that happen. Yeah, pretty much right after this. And I think that's Dr. Range just joining, so I will mark you as here. But yeah, I'll follow up with you about that, Anne Marie. Okay, announcements. Upcoming meetings, we've got the full FSRC meeting on June 5th, and more to come on what will be in that conversation, but I think we'll be hearing from Maryland Department of Health on some of the work that they're doing that's really relevant. We'll be talking through some report-related pieces, and I think we also have a member spotlight coming up too. So more to come on that agenda, but just as a reminder, that meeting will be on June 5th from 10 to noon. Annika will actually be back for that, which is great. And then in terms of committee meetings, you can see the dates here. So we'll have Environment and Production on June 12th. And then this committee will meet in 4 weeks so that'll be June 26th. And then just a kind of reminder to everyone who is a voting member of the FSRC, don't forget to fill out the nominations forms that were sent around, I think last week. And so as a reminder, for those who haven't been part of this process before, every year the council votes on who will be in the co-chair position. Secretary Strickland is always one of the co-chairs, and the other co-chair is voted on each year. So Nancy is our wonderful co-chair right now. And by the way, co-chairs can always run again. But this year, the thing that is new is that we're also doing a nominations and voting process for committee co-chairs. So for this committee, for EMP, and also for communication and coordination, we're at this point in time taking nominations for folks to lead those committees, and we'll eventually have a vote. So if you are a voting member, you received something from me about this. If you didn't receive something from me, it's because that's not the case. But definitely make sure to fill out those forms and nominate people that you think would be great leaders for this council and its committees by June 13th. Okay, annual report timeline. And apologies in advance to anyone who's already heard me give this spiel, but I won't go through all the dates. I'll just mention that things have gotten pushed back a week, which is totally fine. I think we build out timelines under the assumption that they might get pushed a little. So where we're at right now is that we were slightly delayed in getting the draft recommendations to all the state agencies for comment by about a week. We have almost all of the state agency comments back to MDM, which is really great, and we'll talk through that more in the meeting. We're expecting a few more to come through by end of day tomorrow. So by the end of this week, that process should be done. What comes after that is that the committees and their ad hoc work groups that drafted the recommendations will revise based on comments, and we'll talk through that process later in this meeting. And then the recommendations will be finalized by the 29th, so we can send out voting forms to committee members. And those are voting forms that are just simple yes, no's for whether you think the recommendation should be included in the report. So I think so far in conversations, there hasn't been too much that seemed particularly controversial. I think this time around, we've had really great engagement across the council, but if for whatever reason, there's a recommendation where you thought it didn't make sense to be included in the report, this would be your opportunity to say, to vote no. I will mention too, I'm not sure if there's state agencies on the line. Yeah, okay, there are a couple. We understand that some state agencies might have to abstain from these votes. And so as long as you let us know that you'll be abstaining, that just helps us make sure we're using the right kind of denominator to calculate the quorum. That, just for awareness, will be a asynchronous, like virtual voting process. So you'll receive a form on that. So there's not going to be a separate meeting or anything. You'll have a week to fill it out, about a week. And so the vote will be due on June 5th. So more information will come on this. You will get emails on this. You will get reminders on this, but just kind of previewing the process and also letting people know we're about a week behind where kind of we anticipated being for the schedule. But all the steps are the same. So the report draft and feedback form will be sent to council members at the end of June. This is a really great process that allows council members to provide additional feedback. If there's kind of edits that you're realizing, if there's things that have changed, if there's numbers that need to get updated, it's just a good opportunity to get last sets of eyes on the report and its recommendations and make sure it's really kind of reflecting what we all want it to. And I won't go through everything else, but that is just kind of the highlights here. Okay, with that, I think we can talk more about the draft recommendations and where we are in the agency feedback process. I might actually switch to a different document that just has the basic feedback within it as I'm talking through these. But for the first one, this is one that, Diana has been leading, and I know Dr. Lansing and others have been really involved in putting together this recommendation. I'm sorry to say that we are waiting on feedback from MDEM. We have drafted it on our side. We are just finalizing it, and it'll be shared with this group, with the folks that worked on the recommendation by end of day tomorrow. For those who are less familiar with this recommendation, the recommendation here is to create 3 staff positions that would support local food council coordination. So we are kind of putting together and making sure we're able to share kind of feedback on that. I think just to give you kind of a taste of what that will look like, we are just trying to be realistic about what number of personnel we think are needed and what tasks we think should or shouldn't be in scope. I think, to be totally candid, our office has, the Office of Resilience within MDEM has 4 positions in it right now. So the thought of adding 3 positions that are focused specifically on food councils, it might just be a little bit kind of an imbalance. So the feedback that we're providing is going to be along those lines. And then we're going to share kind of which tasks we think would be kind of highest value for new personnel to perform to support local food councils. And hopefully that can just inform any revisions that the ad hoc work group wants to make to that recommendation. But yeah, unfortunately, we're one of like 3 agencies that we're waiting on for feedback, which is sort of funny since we're leading it, but we were spending lots of time talking to other people about theirs. All right, cold storage. Okay, so we received feedback on this from MDE, and I don't think Shannon is on, but the feedback that we received about cold storage mostly had to do with what evaluation has already happened around cold storage, and what types of questions might need to be fleshed out. One thing that came up that I think is really important and just an interesting thing to keep in mind is that the recommendation right now, and it's the same as it was last year, recommends, I think, 6.3 million for a cold storage program, but only 60,000 for administrative purposes, which is pretty low. I think like typically if you were to apply for a federal grant or something, you would get like 10%, often up to 10% that you could put toward administrative purposes. So I think there were just really helpful questions raised around that kind of administrative amount and whether it would really be sufficient to lead this type of program or whether that should be bumped up. Let's see. They also, I think, raised some good questions about, right now, the recommendation says that no legislation is necessary, but they questioned whether that really made sense or whether this is something that would need legislation, because legislation could help spell out where the funding would come from, what the staffing would look like, whether this is a recurring fund, kind of what the long-term planning and maintenance requirements are, all of that good stuff. So I think the suggestion and the comments provided are that it might be helpful to think through some of those longer term requirements and planning around funding for that particular recommendation. We shared this with MDA as well. We're expecting their feedback by end of day tomorrow, and that's the deadline that we gave them because they were the ones that we were kind of the latest to share feedback with. The one thing I'll note is that there is not an agency specifically called out that would lead the cold storage program. And that might have been intentional, but that is just something to think about too. So we shared it with MDE and MDA, knowing that those agencies are probably the most relevant to this. But it's worth noting that there is not a specific agency called out for this. And maybe I'll pause there. Does anyone have questions so far on either of the ones that I just shared, kind of the feedback themes for? Okay, great. And if questions do come up, feel free to put them in the chat, raise your hand. Any of those options are available. Okay, the next one was around the CEP and universal school meals. Thank you to MSDE for providing feedback on this. I don't know if they're on the line today, but they did share feedback via a SharePoint document that was shared with me and Diana and a few others. If I were to summarize the feedback from that, I think in general, it was mostly just helpful clarifying comments and stats that I think will just help strengthen and make sure that we've got the right numbers, that we're describing things in a way that is as accurate as possible. So to my eye, I didn't, and again, this is a topic that I don't know as well as many of you, I did not see anything that seemed like, gigantic substantive changes to the recommendations, but really was just in the vein of trying to make it as, accurate as possible, get the terminology right, have the latest kind of facts and figures and all that good stuff. All right, for expanding food access, the statewide position recommendation, and this is one of the ones that Teresa was helping to lead. Let me just double check my notes here, but we have got feedback from MDE, from the Department of Aging, and from Department of Human Services. And we are just waiting on feedback from Maryland Department of Agriculture, which we're expecting to receive tomorrow by end of day. And let's see, the feedback that we have received so far. Oh yeah, Teresa, please go ahead.
Well, I look forward to your report on that, Summer. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I definitely, we had not identified the agency for that to go under. And I noticed when I looked at the last update, it is under MDA, the Department of Agriculture. So I was just curious about that, if, because I don't think we had identified the agency.
Gotcha. Let me see if I can remember. And Nancy, I don't know if this is the one that you and I traded notes on.
It is. It
okay,
is.
yeah.
And Teresa, I'm going to step in. I may be the one that said if there was an agency, it might be MDA, because I
Right.
know we had gone back and forth about where the farmers market position had been previously housed. And we talked about actually the possibility that it could be housed under the farm organization.
Yes.
So when Summer asked me, I think I likely said, well, MDA is a possibility. So
Well,
I apologize.
agree. They definitely were rising to the top in light of the Maryland market money movement, with the legislation. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you for flagging that, Teresa. I feel like it all becomes jumbled as we get further into the process. So it is helpful to just remember any kind of edits that came through. Yeah. But like I said, we should get feedback from MDA tomorrow. And so if they come back with, some sort of sentiment that helps us understand what they would think about this program living in MDA, that could be helpful. The other feedback that we've received is from MDE, whether there could be any opportunities for this new point of sale position to be a resource that could be involved in food rescue and recovery and could help coordinate some of those activities. From Department of Aging, they had some really good questions around how to, they had some specific ideas, so this will all be shared with you, Teresa, don't worry, but, and the others are part of this group, but they had some good specific questions of where additional information could be added directly into the document. And so some of them were, questions around how can we incentivize farmers to sign on for programs? Is it an awareness issue? Often, farmers might be aware, but for some reason are not participating. Yeah, LaTanya, please. Oh, I'm so glad you're on. You can probably say this much better.
Yeah, I just, Cameron and I had a long conversation about this, and I had gone out to the Waverly farmers market. And, first of all, when you're at the farmers market, you want to just get a big basket and scoop up everything because everything looks so fresh and delicious. But I had, got to talking with some of the farmers, and I was surprised at the number of them that don't participate in the farmers market. And I'm like, this is basically free money for you. Participants get $50, and, we have over 9,000 cards that are going out. So that's where I was, just wondering, like, how could we make it more appealing for the farmers? Because I know we, with the market money, the incentive for the people to come and utilize their, farmers market cards, but, kind of like what's in it for the farmer, because the one in particular I was talking to, he was in Anne Arundel County, and I was like, I worked in Anne Arundel County for 8 years trying to get somebody to come, and so we could, do a pop-up. And he's like, oh, well, I don't think. He's like, why aren't you participating? So that's where it kind of came from, just, actually being out there and seeing, it wasn't like just a theoretical question. It was actually being out there seeing what can we better do to appeal to the farmers. That's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you. And we really appreciate you and Cameron providing feedback. So thank you, LaTanya. Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, the Hughes Center's involved with a project with the Ag Law Education Initiative, and actually the SNAP Ed program and MDA, trying to answer that very question. And what we've discovered a lot with working with the farmers, in a lot of cases, it's just the perceived or real hurdle of the paperwork to do it and taking the time to do it. So I know we originally started out as a project to train the technical service providers to help farmers enroll in programs, but we've actually started to do both virtual enrollment process with USDA, and they've been great about it, as well as in person. We've taken the USDA staff out to them, and Sarah Seven from MDA's staff has been wonderful in this. So I'd be happy to talk to you offline and give you some of the ideas that we've worked on, or try to arrange an event to help increase farmer engagement.
Well, that is such a fantastic connecting of dots. Yeah, I see the applause from Teresa, and I think that's probably how many of us are feeling. And Karen, I see your note in the chat as well about paperwork being a really big hurdle here. So all to say, thank you, LaTanya, and to Cameron, who I'm not sure is on today, for providing that comment, because I think it's really helpful to kind of continue these conversations. And I know that MDOA had also suggested reaching out to Sarah Severin to get some of that information too. And then lastly, we got feedback from DHS, which was just generally like we would be happy to collaborate with, whoever is in this position in the future. So just kind of general positive impression from them. So that's what we've got on the statewide position one. I'm going to move us along. And again, feel free to raise your hands like people have been doing if anything comes up. I'll try and pause too and ask in case there's things that we should dig into more deeply. Okay, the next one was around clarifying donation law. And for this one, I think so far we have only received feedback from MDE. We shared it with MDH and MDA as well. I think MDH, and if anyone from MDH is on, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but I believe they just did not have any feedback on this one specifically, but did review it. And then from MDE, the feedback was helpful. I mean, I think Shannon just noted that she had sat in on meetings that developed this recommendation and kind of talked about the kind of information that MDE shares when they're meeting with those who are mandated to divert under the food residual diversion law. And, just provided some comments that could help maybe provided some comments that could help provide additional context into this recommendation, but I think was generally supportive of the ideas expressed in it, and just said that this recommendation would be beneficial throughout the state. And, it's not as widely understood as it could be. So generally positive. There's a couple things in there that might be helpful or worthy of, adding into the recommendation, but nothing that seemed, really, really significant in the way of feedback. And like I mentioned, we shared this with MDA as well. They're sending their feedback along by the end of the week. So we will follow up with whatever is received from them. All right. Okay, statewide standard. So we received some feedback on this as well. We've shared it with MDA, and we've received some feedback from MDH, that's Department of Health, already. And I want to make sure that I get this right because, because there's some specifics in here. But they basically shared that they appreciated this suggestion. They noted that there are some existing regulations and standards related to food sampling, which are already used by local health departments for farmers markets and other events and festivals. And then noted that best practices and certifications from industry groups also exist, which would cover these types of activities, and that the Department of Health would be happy to consult with the FSRC regarding what types of courses, by which I assume they mean some of those certification courses, might best apply to food tastings and demonstrations. So I will share that. All of this feedback is in a document that you should all be able to access, which I'll share the link to in just a moment. But it sounded, if I'm reading it correctly, like there may be some existing regulations and best practices that could be drawn from. And maybe I'll just pause there and see if anyone has any reactions or interpretations of that. If there's anyone who was part of this recommendation drafting. Okay, well, that's fine. We can definitely, continue noodling on how to incorporate this, but it might be worth thinking through, please excuse the background noise, thinking through if there are tweaks needed. Oh, Teresa, were you about to jump in?
Well, I guess Jocelyn isn't on here. This had come from Lisa Lackemeyer and Jocelyn and their experiences working across the state with SNAP Ed at farmers markets. And they felt that there were differences in different locations. And so I do think, there are, just as you read, I agree, but I think, and they would almost have to answer that of what they have run into from their experience. They felt a clarification might be helpful. So maybe even with that information that you have, maybe, that would be the clarification. So we'll look forward to seeing what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see your note, Nancy. Which is about exactly what I was just wondering, which is that the standard might be there, but the implementation, and this sounds like exactly what you were saying, Teresa, might look a little different from place to place, in which case the problem isn't necessarily having a standard. It's, figuring out how to make the implementation a little bit more even. But yeah, Anne Marie, please go ahead.
Sorry, and I've been having.
I'm not sure if I
connection
froze or
issues, so
you
I
froze.
apologize if I'm commenting.
Okay.
Saying a different topic. I froze, so hence my connection issues. I'm going to turn off my camera. But yeah, I mean, I can tell you, county, if this is about things like education, I know stricter requirements happening at farmers markets than other in the state. But I apologize if issue at farmers market, connection issues.
Yeah, I think we caught some of it, Anne Marie. And so I'll repeat what I heard. And if there's anything else that I'm missing, definitely put it in the chat. But it sounded like you were just describing from your experience in Montgomery County that, you have seen kind of more stringent upholding of the standard in some places as opposed to others. And so you could see an educational component to the standard being potentially helpful. But if I'm getting any of it wrong, definitely correct me in the chat. But yeah, I appreciate you jumping in on that. And that I think is really helpful. for my understanding, and definitely helpful as we're thinking through if there's any ways to kind of tweak this, if we want it to be more about education, or, you know, I think Teresa used the word clarifications on what the standard is, things like that. And I also think, you know, it was great to get that feedback from MDH, and maybe there's even possibilities to have more of kind of a discussion around some of the things that you've heard, Teresa, from Jocelyn, and now I'm forgetting the other person that you mentioned, but from the folks who kind of gave, Lisa, who gave the on the ground examples. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. And I see Anne Marie's note now. Yeah, that's really helpful. All right. Let's see. Okay, pop-up markets. So this is another one that Teresa helped to lead the drafting of. Okay, so we've shared this with MDA and also with Maryland Department of Planning. And we, you know, as with other ones, MDA has until end of day tomorrow to provide their feedback. So we're expecting that, which is great. And then we did receive some feedback already from MDP, and I'm just looking through it, but in general, I think it was pretty positive. And in case anyone's wondering why we reached out to Maryland Department of Planning, and Teresa can definitely jump in on this, this recommendation is all about the idea of how it would be great if local planners and local planning processes could consider locations and opportunities for pop-up markets to expand access. So we thought Maryland Department of Planning, they have a great network and kind of expertise on local planning processes, and might be able to bring kind of a helpful eye to it from that perspective. And I think they did. And I'll be, you know, excited for this group to be able to go through some of those comments more fully. But I think in general, their feedback was along the lines of just some like prodding questions on definition. So understanding how exactly healthy food priority areas might be defined. And also maybe more importantly, at what scale, because that could be helpful for planners to be, you know, thinking about and understanding as they're working through these decisions. Similar questions around how affordable is defined, and also how temporary these pop-up markets are. So I think just a lot of good definitional questions, which probably gets into that exact kind of planner mindset of figuring out, you know, how would this really be implemented? Let's see. There are also some notes around local zoning, which can place caps on the number of allowed uses, which I know probably a lot of folks in this room have, or in this group have come up against in the past and are familiar with. But I think that is a really helpful consideration just in terms of, you know, where it might be more difficult to get an additional use for a pop-up market. And then they had a couple of really, really kind of specific suggestions for where there could be tweaks to the recommendation language. But overall, I think it was very positive, and kind of bringing the mindset of, you know, the types of questions that a planner might ask if they were trying to make this recommendation happen. So I will pause there. If you have any thoughts or comments, reactions, Teresa, definitely jump in, or if others do.
I guess one question that arises when I hear that, you know, they're asking for specific sizes or whatever, and maybe we want to put some kind of language in there, you know, saying small, medium, or large, you know, I don't know, but I'm sure in every community it's going to be different, but the idea, and for every event, maybe, you know, it will be different too. So it'd be hard to generalize one specific, you know, thought, you know, one specific event that we're trying to name, but just trying to say that in that example that is given in that recommendation with the food trucks, you know, I think just the idea that while they're looking at these things and already making some zoning around food trucks, to think about, you know, farmers markets and pop-up events as well, you know, as opportunities to sell local food where it's safe, there's electricity or a restroom or, you know, things like that, because that's all within their knowledge base.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the fact that they're getting into definitional questions probably reflects the fact that their feedback is more detailed as opposed to, something like a bigger concern or challenge to the recommendation. I think that to the question around scale, they're really asking about what the scale is that healthy food priority areas are being defined at, which again, exactly as you were saying, could be different for each community. I think like probably we know we're talking more about definitely neighborhood scale is one of the scales we'd be talking about, but we all know of geographies where there's kind of a much larger scale to a healthy food priority area than just the neighborhood. So I think the feedback will hopefully at least pose some helpful questions, but to your point, Teresa, not every question like can be answered at this point, but at least is good food for thought as we're thinking through getting the recommendations to kind of like the next draft phase. So definitely, I don't think, go ahead.
And it almost seems like those are excellent questions for us to know that they're thinking about when they make a designation or, so that I think that we need to be inclusive when we word it for various sizes.
Yeah. Yep. That's well said. Yep. And I think we might just have one more in here. Yes, which is food system mapping. And I don't believe Meg is on, but yeah, she's not on, which is totally fine because as I mentioned, she had something come up. So for this recommendation, and this is a newer one, so maybe I'll just flag what it is as well. Those who were on earlier of these committee meetings might remember that Meg was starting to work with Department of Information Technology, DO-IT, on understanding what resources they already had for food system mapping. And Meg has actually been working with DO-IT to start putting together kind of a preliminary food system map based on data that already existed. And so we had some questions about whether we even wanted to have a recommendation related to food system mapping in the report, since we knew that, we're actually more in a phase of starting to do stuff as opposed to, make recommendations to do stuff. But Meg ended up putting together, and I think with discussion with the ad hoc work group that have been working on this, a recommendation that would create, I think it's one personnel position within DO-IT that would be able to maintain this map over time. So we haven't gotten any feedback from DO-IT yet. I might follow up with Meg about that because I think that's the only agency that I didn't hear anything from so far, and it would just be really good to get their eyes on this recommendation, knowing that Meg, of course, did speak with someone within DO-IT already throughout this process, but just at least giving them as much opportunity as possible to comment if they have feedback. And then the last thing that is not in here, but since you were on the line, Joe, I want to make sure I mention it. The Food is Medicine parking lot document, the Maryland Department of Health also offered to review that document. They just found it when they were going through the folder, which I was like, wow, great. Thank you for going through the whole folder, and just offered to provide feedback. I gave them a little bit of extra time because since it's not a recommendation, we have more time. But they offered, I know you already spoke with the Medicaid team, but they offered to kind of share with the Medicaid team again for to get additional eyes on it. Oh shoot, we can't hear you, Joe. Let me try muting and see if that helps at all. No, we can't hear you. And it always has to happen to somebody. But yeah, I think I'm getting a positive reaction, which is good. And then if there's anything else, yeah, definitely put it in the chat. But it was, I don't know if anyone from MDH is here today. I don't think so. I'm from the state, but just a big thank you to them definitely for offering to review that as well. Okay. Any questions related to agency feedback? Let me just double check. Yeah, that was the last one. Any questions related to the agency feedback that's been received? Okay, then this is a good moment for me to share the folder where all of this lives right now. So there's a folder that I think everyone should have access to that just has all of the recommendations. Within that, there's a folder for this committee. And then within that folder, there's a folder which has agency feedback. So I will, I might actually just share my All right, it looks like a few people might not be able to access this, so apologies. There's always some issues with Google Drive sharing. So if you can't access it, I apologize, and I can try and make sure you can see some version of it, but I will just share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So we've got this folder called Agency Feedback Documents. And to give everyone a sense, again, of kind of like the file structure, so there's a folder which Dr. Lansing very helpfully created, which just has all the draft recommendations. Once you're in that folder, you can click into the distribution and access draft recommendations. This is where you can find all of the recommendations for this committee. And then you can click into agency feedback documents. You know what, I'm just gonna rename, let's see, can you guys see it? Okay, so basically I'll rename it so it shows up at the top, but there are some agencies that created specific documents with their feedback. So MDP is one of those, MDH is one of those. You can see document 1 and document 3, that's MDP and MDH. But if you want to just see everything, you can click on this document that says Distribution and Access Committee Agency Feedback. It will pull up the document that I was just reading from throughout this meeting. And this basically kind of indexes out to everything that you would need. So, you know, the link for each of the recommendations is the link to that recommendation. If the feedback was provided over email, the text has just been pasted in. If it was provided in the form of a document, so for instance, the Universal School Meals ones is a SharePoint document that has been linked to. So you can just go through this and kind of see the status of all the feedback for the recommendations. I will follow up with all of the folks that are leading the ad hoc work groups and have led the recommendation development just to make sure you have this link and know what to do with it. But what we're hoping to do between now and approximately the 29th, so approximately a week from now, is to make any revisions that are needed to the recommendations to reflect the feedback. In some cases, the feedback really is specific recommendations or specific edits for the recommendation. So it might be like, add this stat here, consider tweaking this wording. In other cases, you may want to have more of a discussion with your ad hoc work group about how to address the feedback. But that is the intent right now, is that the ad hoc work group leaders will go through and start to make those edits. We are hoping that this will happen the same way the recommendation process is, which is that the kind of ad hoc work groups will sort of go off and do this. So it'll be happening in a more decentralized way. But definitely, you know, if you have concerns or questions or feel that you would need support from others in this committee with it, you can let us know. But I will follow up with all of the ad hoc work group leaders about where this feedback is, what the next steps are. I'll share this after this meeting, but just, you know, as mentioned, we're still waiting on feedback from MDEM, from MDA, and from Do It. And so that'll, you know, filter through over time, and this will get a little bit updated. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and go back to the slides. Let's see. All right. So I think I've mostly just covered what we just talked about, which is we're in this phase right now that's highlighted near the bottom, which is we're almost in it. We will be in it starting tomorrow, where the ad hoc work groups will edit recommendations to reflect the feedback that we've received. I think we're really fortunate that we got so much good feedback, and we want to make sure that we really put it to the best use possible. And all of that will set us up to be able to start the voting process. Again, the yes/no vote for inclusion of draft recommendations in the report on the 29th. So it is really important that we, you know, start as soon as we can on editing the recommendations. I think I've covered this a lot already, but I will just do it again in case anyone joined a little bit later. Again, the vote that's coming up will be a virtual vote. So you'll get a Google form similar to what you got for the nominations last week. Each committee will, and each voting member of the committees will get that virtual voting form. It will have all of the recommendations written in it. And underneath the recommendation, there will be an option about like, this should be included in the report, this should not. Again, I will make sure to ask agency folks or other folks if they need to abstain from this vote for any reason. That is totally fine. It's just helpful if we know. And then, yeah, if you're unsure about your committee member status, you can always ask me. And Anne-Marie, I will follow up with you about your committee member status to make sure we get that to where we want it to be before this voting process happens. But that's basically what's coming next for this vote. It'll be open for a week. You'll get a bunch of reminders, and that will help us make sure we've got the full set of recommendations for the report. Any questions on this process? Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
So Summer, I just want to make sure I understand it, and I might be the person that's confused on here.
Oh, no,
But
you know what?
So the committee members,
Yeah.
so for instance, distribution and access committee members vote for the distribution and access committee recommendations to move forward. The same thing with environment and production. And then the actual, if they are moved forward, the actual council votes for the recommendations as a full group of recommendations when they're in the report form. Is that correct? And maybe I'm the only person that's confused. I'm just trying to clarify for myself.
Yes, I believe that's correct. And I'm also realizing now that I just told you all about how this timeline changed by a week, and then I have the wrong dates on here for the voting process. So let's see, it will be the 29th to the 5th, not the 22nd to the 29th. So please excuse that typo. But to your question, Nancy, yes, I believe that's the way it works. Yeah, I'm sorry to everyone who can't access the document. We have some trouble with sharing Google stuff, unfortunately, outside of the state. Usually it has worked putting it in the folder that Dr. Lansing has created. I'll try and fix that with the people who need to see it outside of this meeting, but we may have an issue where not everyone can see it. I will get to that. But Nancy, yeah, I believe that is the way it works. If that sounds really different than how it's worked in the past, you and I should definitely talk so I can make sure that I'm understanding it correctly and we do it properly. But yeah, I believe first step is for the committees to vote on the committee recommendations. And then eventually when it gets into final report form, there's the vote on the report overall by the entire council. But yeah, no, it's a lot of steps in the process. So never hesitate to ask questions because you might sometimes uncover something that's incorrect. Okay, we actually do have a little time for member updates today because I know we've gone, and thank you for the clarification of the process, Nancy. Now I'm going to double check it and make sure I've described it properly, but I believe that's how it typically works. Since we have a little time, I think it probably is a good idea to see if anyone has member updates. Obviously, you know, we know with all the flooding and everything happening in Western Maryland, there may be updates from that part of the state in terms of what the food needs are. We know there could be updates on any kind of federal related changes that are going on or other things you want to flag that you want to share with the group. So I will just stop there. And if anyone has an update, feel free to raise your hand and we'll just go around to whoever has anything they'd like to share.
Hi, everyone. I'll share an update from Western Maryland. Lonaconing and Westernport in our county suffered extreme damage from the flood. Governor Moore came here and so did Russell Strickland was here as well. And those areas were declared state of emergency. There has been great response to food needs, and Maryland Physicians Care donated $5,000 worth of food to that region, and that has been given and distributed. And I just got an email this morning that one of the Food Council members' churches donated 24 pallets of food weighing 33,457 pounds. Also, and that was being distributed today. That was, it was being taken to the main outreach center in that area where they're accepting donations, and then it will be distributed. So it was going there this morning. So there's been a tremendous outpouring, and the Food Council has provided an avenue for communications and looking for volunteers to go down to that area. And America's Hauling for Hope, which is Clint Rawlings, and he is a member of our Western Maryland Food Council, and Maryland Physicians Care Director of Population Health, Lorena DeLeon, is a member of the Food Council as well. And, you know, I put out on the Food Council email list, and they had 30 some volunteers come. So, you know, they have felt that the Food Council has provided a great communication, you know, area for communication. So I'm grateful to see that happening that way.
Well,
And the
thank you.
health department's been very involved with giving tetanus shots for people that might need a booster, and, you know, donating PPE to be used in that area. And then it just went out on our internal email today about the nurses that were helpful, because one of the elementary schools needed to evacuate 200 people by boat. And the school nurses, you know, really went above and beyond to help in those situations. And those kids have been traumatized. I'm also involved with the Community Resilience Network here, which is a team that's bringing mind-body medicine work to the school system. And that group is responding to hold some stress management and, you know, supportive resilience groups in that area as well. So there's been a big community response, and people are coming together. So thank you for everybody's care. I did put a link, you know, if anybody would like to donate to the Western Maryland Food Bank, there is a link there on that page, but any updates are on that page. So thank you all so much.
Well, thank you, Teresa. It's great to hear about all the resources that have already made their way to the communities that are affected, and really appreciate you sharing that link so folks can give as they're able and just keep track of updates.
And I also wanted to share water was a big need as well, because they were not able to use their water, and that is still a concern. There's some raw sewage that's gotten into some water in parts of the county, but they were calling for additional flooding yesterday, maybe up to 4 inches. I think we got about 2.5, and so that was really good. That storm system broke up before it did any more damage to our already saturated ground here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nancy, I saw your hand and then I saw you put it down, I think. And I know Dr. Range, you have your hand up. So I'll go to you, and Nancy, we can come back to you if there's something you want to share. But go ahead, Dr. Range. Oh, we can't hear you. Or at least I can. If others can, let us know. But I'm not hearing you. No. I know, it's testing us today. Okay, well, maybe we'll go to Nancy, and if you want to troubleshoot or put it in the chat. Okay, and she just left and is rejoining. Nancy, did you have something you wanted to jump in with?
Just two things. One, many of you probably already know that the SNAP Ed program is part of the budget conciliation bill going through Congress. And so you may have heard from Lisa Lockenmeyer, who is part of the council and has been is the director of Maryland's SNAP Ed program. If you haven't heard from her, let me know. But, you know, they're asking anyone that can, as either an individual or from their organization, to send their support or thoughts on to our congressional members. The other thing, and this is very short, is the Hughes Center and ALEI co-sponsor interns every summer, and they'll be working on a number of food-related projects. And so if there are issues as a result of some of these, or questions as a result of some of these recommendations that we still need to have addressed, even as we move the recommendation forward, please let me know, because we will certainly be happy to add them as topics for the interns to work on. I know that accessing food from community gardens is one of the issues that we've already highlighted for them. Likewise, and this will probably be of more interest to if there's others on here from the Eastern Shore, The law school has also offered a law school intern to help with questions and issues related to the newly formed food councils and their work on the Eastern Shore. But we'd like to, I'm sure some of the issues that they'll be looking at and some of their questions are also found as we look at this work throughout the state. So again, if you do have questions or topics that could be researched, please send them to us. I can't promise that they'll all make the list, but we certainly want to help as broad an audience as possible. That's it.
Thank you, Nancy. That is great to hear about. Dr. Range, I think I saw you join again. Do you want to try? We can
How
see
about
if
now?
Oh, yes. Whatever you did work.
Yay. Okay. Yeah, no, I just had one quick update as it relates to staff and funding changes for us at the FEC. I think I shared on one of our last calls we had that we did have a lot of funding that stopped both federally and locally here for the FEC. So as a result, I will be transitioning from my role as director as the FEC, ultimately for us to then be able to fund a full-time program manager who is Michelle Burton. I think she was on the call. I'm not sure if she still is. Yeah, she is. So if you haven't met Michelle, I ultimately wanted to take an opportunity to just make that note. I want to connect with you too. There might be some formal processes that need to happen as far as like transitioning over to Michelle. But yes, I definitely will still be engaged in the conversation, both at the local and state level, just through my own consulting, business and capacity. But it's been great, at least serving in this capacity. I want to share that update with this group.
Well, thank you for that. I know some of us got the chance to hear that already on the other call, and we will definitely miss your participation and presence. And we're really excited to work with Michelle going forward. And I'll definitely make sure to follow up with the two of you about any of the kind of formal stuff that needs to happen. But for now, really, really glad that you're both able to be here. And I think, definitely echoing what Teresa said. I saw something in the chat. Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you to the folks who are on the line from Howard County, from the LHIC, who flagged, and I want to make sure people don't miss this, that they're recruiting for a position for the Howard County Food Council, which is really exciting. So there's a link that was shared a few minutes ago in the chat. If folks are able to get that out to their networks, I think that would be probably really, really helpful. I know we're all excited to see this new food council get off the ground. Any other member updates? Okay, well, as always, if anything, comes to mind after the meeting, feel free to reach out with it. We can make sure it gets shared around with this group. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else on our agenda today. Yeah, Teresa, go ahead.
I just wanted to share that we had a Maryland Food Bank food giveaway today in Frostburg. And the reason I was late, we did something we have never tried before in collaboration with Maryland Physicians Care, which got a disparities grant from the health department. We did an education right at the food giveaway, and it was so well received, and we're hoping to continue to do that. So I just wanted to share with this group because I get so excited from getting out and, having an opportunity to do something like that. We touched on budgeting. We talked about beans. We had several different foods for people to sample. And, it really, everybody was, very enthusiastic about it and asking to do it again. And it was really going out in the community and reaching people where they were. This giveaway in Frostburg is at a location that happens to have a classroom attached with it. It's where the Food System Resiliency Council came for our food tour of Western Maryland. And it's the first, but I hope it won't be the last. So I wanted to share that.
Well, that's fantastic and super, super smart to combine the giveaway with some education at the same time. And for those of us who got to see that facility, it was really, really impressive. Well, thank you for that, Teresa. I think that's a great note to end on. And as always, you can reach out to myself either directly or at either of the emails that are listed here. And I'll be following up about a couple of those things that I mentioned, including hopefully getting people access to the agency feedback who don't have it. So you'll hear from me after this, and thank you everyone for being part of this committee and for sharing your time and your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much. Bye.